notice about that.
All right. Can you tell if there are other attendees who are waiting to get in or trying to get in? Should I wait a couple minutes or?
I see 2 attendees, and neither I don't see anyone raising hands, and I'm not getting. I'll check my emails to see if I'm getting anything there.
Okay, and there's Jose. Good. Well, then let's get started. Welcome to the first meeting of 2021. We can start. We'll jump right in. This can be a short meeting, and if we're conscious of our time, it can be even shorter. So just agenda and materials review. We got the agenda that had the minutes from November and December's meetings. Do we have any changes we want to make to the agenda? We will go over the minutes approval number 4, but any changes other than or different than what you see?
For the agenda, sorry. So are you asking about the minutes or the agenda?
The agenda, just the agenda.
So in my comments, I will ask, I think, Mark or Leah to comment on the 2 attached documents from the sort of supplemental investigation that I asked for in the last meeting. So I don't know if that needs, it's not going to need a whole bunch of time, but I just want to flag, I will ask for a few minutes or that be included in the auditor's report.
Okay. So no other adjustments. We'll go ahead as it's stated. So we can do public comment. And I don't see any hands. I feel kind of weird about moving away from public comment before we get to the point where public comment in the agenda was supposed to begin, in case we have people who show up late. So maybe going back to number 1, maybe we could do minutes approval and then public comment just to give people more time to show up. Okay. So we're going to do minutes approval, then public comment, then comment from board members. Do we have any adjustments to make to, I wonder what's the easiest for the minutes taker to do all the November ones and then December adjustments? Okay, any adjustments from November's meeting? All right, any from December's meeting? And I'm assuming that Bernadette, oh.
No, I just moved that we accept the minutes as we were received by us.
For November and December, yes?
Second.
Yes,
Do we vote on that?
yes, for November and
Okay.
December.
Do we, all in favor of moving forward with the minutes as received? Just raise
Aye.
your hand or say aye. Okay. I see your hand, Bernadette.
She raised her hand.
Now,
Here.
yeah. All right, let's open the floor again for public comment in case anyone has decided to speak. And I don't see any, so we can go to comments from board members and community liaisons. And I'll just go in the order that I see on my screen, and that is Michael and then Lindsay after Michael.
I have no public comments today.
Lindsay and then Rick.
So the police commission will meet on Thursday. So I don't have anything new to report from that. The ad hoc committee met last week and we closely looked at, I think, 6 of the 13 motions that were on the table that had to do with oversight. We passed 4 of them. I think there's still it's a little bit disjointed. The conversation's a little bit disjointed there. We ended up going through a lot of motions that are sort of mechanisms to achieve an end, but we never talked about kind of the main motion that would sort of set things in motion, like set the mechanisms into play. So it's still very much sort of in the air. I would say for anybody who's interested, those meeting materials are available online. If you look up ad hoc committee, City of Eugene, it'll pop up and you Google search and you can look through the motions in detail. But Rick is sitting on the subcommittee, so maybe you can speak more about like how that process is going. But what came to the big table were a series of motions about the Civilian Review Board, how it might function. There were some items about membership and concerns about not having overrepresentation of any law enforcement, making sure that community is well represented. There were motions about like, sorry, it's a very jumbled conversation in my head. There were motions about how to change or transform sort of the purview of the CRB, and a lot of, I think, fruitful and continued discussion about what the role and scope of the Civilian Review Board should be, and how that should be balanced with other oversight roles, whether that's police commission or the chief, or anyway, so that continues to evolve. I would also call out David Sayas, gave a motion to do a more systematic sort of analysis of the oversight, like within the City of Eugene, not at the ad hoc table, but a different like level of analysis. And so we didn't get to discuss that motion, but that's out there as well. So anyway, it's a work in progress. It's messy, it's hard. And I look forward to continuing to kind of wade through it.
Thanks, Lindsay. Rick, and then Jose.
I really have little to add to what Lindsay said. I think that she adequately summarized it. That we are a bit kind of, we were kind of taking some of the motions before the cart was attached to the horse. There's a fairly large, not large segment, but a vocal segment of the group that wants to change the makeup of, or not the makeup, but the structure of the Citizen Review Board so that it becomes an adjudicating board, deciding the facts of each individual complaint as they're being adjudicated. There's some movement in that group that wants to make the Civilian Review Board, in addition to being the adjudicator, the prosecutors and the investigator at the same time, which I raised significant objection to, but that's going to be decided by the committee. Ultimately, if it gets referred to the city council is going to have to wrestle with that as to what they want to do, because it's going to be some changes to the ordinance, to the city charter, and to suggestions regarding changes to state law. So it's going to be kind of a tough one to resolve, I think. Other than that, I think it's been going reasonably well. There are a lot of people on the committee, a lot of voices heard from. Some of the input is very, very good. Some I'm not so encouraged about, but I think it's going well. Giving people a chance to speak anyway.
Thank you, Rick. Jose, and then Bill.
I don't have any much to add other than I'd like to express my gratitude for everybody doing this work right now. It's in the sense that it's like, okay, well, we're just going to go through another crisis and keep doing this work. And I appreciate the work that Mark and Leah do, important civic duty kind of work. I'm at a time where none of us want to work. So thank you.
Bill, and then Bernadette.
I just want to say it's nice to see everybody in 2021 and look forward to working with you. But That's it for me.
I'm not sure if you guys can hear me because you guys were breaking up a lot when I was trying to listen to you. But what I got from Lindsay and Rick was troubling, concerning. Concerning is probably the better word. So I appreciate that. Be able to represent all of the points of view that need to be thought through, because the unintended consequences that sometimes happen as a result of making changes based on what's going on right now or what is at the table, it can become really problematic, and it's not seen. The problems aren't going to be seen sometimes for years, and then there's no kind of correcting it. So I think taking the ship slow and steady into port is a good way to do it. I wanted to comment a little bit about the family that came to speak last month and make public comment. It really kind of weighed on me that we weren't able to adequately give them time to express their, I think, frustrations with the process. And I'm not sure how, if there's a way to reach out to them, kind of express that, probably not at this point, but I think it's something we need to be mindful of going forward, that if we are reviewing a case and then the next, we need to make sure we have enough space and time for the previous month's family members, whoever, to kind of come forward and be able to say what they need to say. It kind of concerned me, and I just wanted to raise that. That's all.
Responding to that, I think that is something that we could work into the agendas, right? Like that's okay. I wanted to quickly just bring up the memo that we sent to the chief, and I wanted to, maybe we can work this into our discussion during the community impact case process, but I wanted to bring up the idea of reworking it, possibly to send to police commission. If we have any recommendations that we think would be valuable for them to hear from our discussion. So I just want to make sure that we touch on that if we need to. And just also express my gratitude to this group and the work that we're doing. And I see, Michael, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I always forget that that we do the public comments and the commission liaisons at the same time. So I forgot to speak up as the Human Rights Commission liaison. So they didn't have a meeting in December, and the meeting for January is next week. So I have nothing there. And I missed the meeting in November, and I still haven't gotten around to watching it on Zoom. But I promise a very robust update on Human Rights Commission next month.
Perfect. And we'll get an update on police commission too, because that'll happen this week, right, Lindsay? Okay. So now we are to the discussion point, and we wanted to hear kind of our thoughts and feelings of the process of going through the community impact case from start to finish. And I don't know, Leah, did you have anything that you wanted to guide us through with this? Or did you want us to just discuss?
I did not create a guiding template or anything like that. I think did I send an email where I mentioned a few things that I thought had come up that you wanted to discuss? Okay, so I did that. I can pull that up and we can start from there. And then also just sort of thinking, your comment on police commission, Carolyn, brought up to me that specifically this week on their agenda, they have the control holds, handcuffing, and impact weapons policy that also has the tear gas in it. So that's a policy they'll be talking about on Thursday. And then the other one they're looking at is civil disturbances, I think, 316. So obviously ones that are very pertinent to your community impact case review. So just wanted to point that out before you got going. Carolyn, do you want me to pull up that email, or what do you?
I think I have it up. It was the 3 recommendations. I think one was about Lindsay suggesting, is that the right one?
Yeah, I think so.
So Lindsay last time suggested a vote on forwarding the police recommendations memo on 40 millimeter to police commission. And that was informally tabled to this meeting. So I don't know, Lindsay, do you know what I'm referring to, what I am referring? And do
Yeah.
you want to?
I mean, so when we were going through the case, that was one where Leah had outlined some specific policy recommendations when it came to the 40 millimeter. What do we call them? Impact weapon? It's not beanbags, it's sponge round, I think is what we call this. Okay, so this less lethal impact weapon. And I thought I agreed with all the recommendations that Leah had put forward. I can go and grab my notes to be able to read those recommendations out loud if that's helpful, but more or less that we should rework the wording around the use of them in crowd control situations, that we should consider how equipment might impair the ability to see, I think this was in that same section, the ability to see what was going on because the body cams were sort of obscured in a few, not just with the 40 millimeter, but in several situations, body cams were covered by protective equipment or other tools that officers were carrying, and that was problematic. And yeah, I would have to look at my specific notes to give you like the rundown, but I agreed with those recommendations. So that was all. I wanted to make sure that we as a group had an opportunity to weigh in, and that as I go to police commission, you send me with whatever specific things you want me to present at that table. And if I'm remembering correctly, that policy that you referenced, Leah, it also had the 40 millimeter impact weapons is included within that policy. So it will be discussed on Thursday.
I feel since we're not talking about an actual like case tonight, we can do more speak as you have something to say. Is that agreeable, Lindsay?
If you'll just like give me a second, I'm going to run and grab my binder with all my notes in it. I left it outside the office, so I'll be right back.
Sure. So that was one thing while she's running to get it for the agenda to talk about. And then another one was the idea of reworking the memo to go to the police commission. And I guess having Lindsay back for that would be helpful too. There she is.
And I don't mean to hold the floor. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves.
And then Leah also did ask that a discussion of the strengths and challenges of this process, of the community impact case process, would be a helpful thing for her office to hear. And one thing she pointed out is the challenge of the timeline of the review, how we only have the 14 days to review it and the 30 days to respond. I think that the email to the chief went out beyond the 30 days, but since the chief was at the meeting, I think that counts as a response or recommendations to the chief. So it all works out. Anything else from anybody else? I mean, go ahead, Rick.
Do we need to send the entire community impact cases statement to the police commissioner, or just the recommendations? I don't know whether they need to have all of the thoughts that we had regarding each of the cases individually, but that's just something that came to mind. I don't have anything strong about in my background about that. I really don't care, but I just don't know whether we need to muddy the water any with that, or whether it's any of their business.
Yeah, that's And that's good feedback. I don't know. I don't know that they would get the context of the cases and our thoughts on it anyway without having watched the whole thing. But I think the recommendations, in my opinion, but anyone else want to weigh in on this?
I think to the extent that it informs the policy discussion, it's useful to have detail. I mean, whoever the CRB member is can try to fill in some of, why these policy recommendations maybe are coming from the CRB. But I do agree. I can see your point, Rick, about like, well, certainly there are some details that the police commission can't know that were in that letter, right? There's names, for example, that would have to be redacted. I guess my question would be more around like, what is the value of the transparency that so outside of this body, knowing what this body sent to the chief, if there's some value in that. I'm like honestly saying like, I don't know. And if so, if there is value in that, to what end or anyway, so that's kind of like what I'm noodling through, thinking about like whether that letter is reworked and sent to police commission just so that they can kind of see the process. But I don't have a hard opinion one way or the other. I think I could be swayed in either direction, just initial thoughts.
Well, if it's transparency that we're after, I think probably the whole thing needs to go and let it fall where it may. But I just don't know whether they're going to need to see all that. And I do agree that we need to redact it if there are names in there.
Carolyn, is it okay if I talk?
Yeah, go ahead, especially if I'm not looking at the screen.
So, I mean, I think we should just send the recommendations and what we came up, what we saw. I don't think they need to have how our process works and do that. I mean, our meetings are open if they want to come see how we do things, and they could have attended the meeting. I think it's more important that what we drew out of all of the investigations and think that this should now be, what we think the police commission should now look at and see, are these the right policies or should they be changed based on what we saw in it.
Bernadette, I see your hand.
I'm going to disagree that we need to send the report over to the police commission. I've been looking a lot at what the enactment is, what we're supposed to do. I mean, it says clearly that we're oversight and advisory to city council. And I think while I think we have a liaison to the police commission, as we do to the Human Rights Commission, I feel like if we're sending our document over to them, it's kind of becoming advisory to them in a way, as in we're reporting to them. And I mean, we have a member there. They represent what we did at our meetings, what our group decided as a result of that meeting, to make a recommendation to the chief through the police commission. But I think I'm not sure that there's a reason to send our report that we're sending to the chief to the police commission. I think if the chief wants to share that with the police commission, which he might very much want to do since they're going to be looking at policy implications, I think that do not for us to necessarily do.
Michael.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. I think if our capacity is advisory to the city council, then perhaps we might route the redacted letter to the city council, since that's who we if that's who we advise. And two city council members are members of the police commission, so that would be also informing a larger segment of that body, incidentally.
Mark.
I was just going to offer, it's where are we most impactful? I think we're impactful with the senior command staff in terms of these types of recommendations, and I think we're impactful with city council because they'll push it to the city manager, who's the boss of the police chief. I've never been the liaison to the police commission. I would say that they would be third in the queue in terms of impactful, but again, I would defer perhaps to the liaison for that because they do policy recommendations, but it's where we are impactful in terms of the recommendations that come out from a community impact case.
I'm going to draw attention to the chat where Bernadette, and I don't know if it's because her voice is going in and out, but Bernadette said we send a report to city council each year and we can include that in that report. So we can include the entire recommendations we sent to the chief redacted in that report. Is that, I think that's what she's saying. Jose, do you have any thoughts on this part of the discussion?
Thank you for including me. I feel like my role right now is to listen and learn. Yeah, I'm still like figuring out the mapping of the civilian review board in relation to other entities. So this conversation's actually been really helpful to hear. So a non-answer.
It's a good non-answer though. I'm still figuring it out too, and I've been on it for 4 years, and it's an interesting system we have set up. So I've heard a few different things, and I don't know if we need to vote on what we end up doing. I assume that we probably should come to some sort of an agreement and not just unilaterally choose, but I've heard that we could send a recommendation redacting names. We could send just our recommendation without the discussion part included. We could send nothing and just let our liaison liaise for us. And I've heard that we could send the letter to city council separately from the annual report or within the annual report. So we have a few ideas for a few board members. Lindsay?
So I think what would be helpful for me is if we can send specific policy recommendations from like based on what we've seen, or whether they're policy recommendations or specific policies we would like, if we just want to kick it over the fence and say, police commission, please look at these specific policies for these things. Either way, that would be very helpful for me. And then we can do that in a super timely fashion because they meet on Thursday. So that would be my strong preference, is to go into that meeting feeling like I have some kind of, we've had a discussion as a group and there's hopefully some consensus around what that should look like. The rest of the recommendations, I am a little more agnostic about. The rest of the things in that letter, I'm a little more agnostic about the timeliness of those things. And Bernadette's recommendation to include that in a city council report makes sense. It creates a long-term document that would be publicly searchable for the future, and it would be a mechanism that we have used in the past. So that seems sensible to me, but the specific policy recommendations feel more time sensitive than an annual report. And I would feel odd as the liaison rolling in without some backing of the group. And if it's helpful, I have sorry, and just so that you know, like if we get to that point, I've identified all the policy things in my notes.
I saw Michael's hand and then Bill. Let's do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I interrupted someone earlier today in a meeting, and so I'm trying to like be better by raising my hand. So I just wanted to, it sounds to me like I don't see any reason why we can't like split the difference here and include it in their report to the city council, and also send an earlier version to whoever we decide to send it to. Since it will be the same thing and going to the same people theoretically. So just a suggestion for doing both.
And that's in terms of the city council, correct? Not
Yes, I guess.
aside from,
Yeah.
okay.
Given what I said at the end, I guess, yes.
Yeah. Okay, Bill, go ahead.
So I guess my preference would be, since when we talk about what our job is as the Civilian Review Board versus what the Police Commission does, I mean, I feel comfortable if we were just to say, I think you need to review these 5 policies and then let them decide how their review should be done and what those policies, just say that these are things that we've noticed that probably need to be clarified or something done with them. And then just throw them to their group and let them look at it, you know, because I think there's things that we see that we kind of feel like maybe the policy isn't clear enough for the officers to understand what they should and shouldn't be doing or something. But I think it's more up to them to decide if the policy is right or not through their discussions. But I think we could kick them over and just say, here's these 3 that we think may need some to be looked at.
I agree with Bill. Now that I think about it, I think that if we make recommendations about what the policy should be, that's kind of out of our bailiwick and they should do it. But I think that if we make suggestions about the things that need to be looked at, Lindsay can maybe point out to them what the issue was when we saw it, and avoid making any recommendations one or the other, and then we can just let them take care of it.
I definitely appreciate hearing from Lindsay and Bill. And I don't know, maybe Rick has been a liaison in the past, but I know Bill has served on the POCO or Police Commission, and and Lindsay's on it now. So I like Jose, I don't have a huge sense of what goes on in those meetings. I think, Michael, you've attended some of them too, so you probably have more knowledge. I think that's helpful for me to hear your recommendations, knowing what happens at those meetings. Lindsay, you said you had some kind of like roughly drawn up of what they are. Do you want to run those by us and so we can hear those?
Sure. And if we want to, I don't know what the best process, I'll just give you a kind of a list. And if we want to go through them one at a time, that's fine. Or if the laundry list seems okay to you, we can, I'll try to craft a motion, but I'll go from the back of my binder to the front. So I start an issue that was in a closing memo that was dealing with body worn cameras. So there was concerns about officers who get called out from home not having body worn cameras when they arrive on the scene if they don't stop by headquarters first. And so I would like to just surface that, and that I think it would be good policy, or probably more, it would probably be good practice to review how to ensure body worn cameras are available for people who get called out directly to scenes from home. That was one. The other was about the pepper ball launcher in Leah's, let's see, in Leah's memo to the chief, she mentioned the pepper ball launcher is a tool designed for crowd dispersal, and yet it showed that it becomes difficult to sight the weapon when officers are wearing gas masks. So that we have Police Commission look at the pepper ball policy and move towards discouraging the use of pepper ball as a pain compliance tool, i.e. firing at humans. And that pepper ball policy, or the pepper ball vest also obscures the body worn cameras. So that's another body worn camera visibility issue. So it would be pepper ball policy, not aiming at people. I mean, so if what I'm hearing from the group is that we would like to look more at what are the policies we would like police commission to carefully review, then pepper ball policy, body worn camera policies and practices, right? Because some of these are practice things, not policy things. Like how do people who get called out from home make sure they have their body worn cameras and that they're properly charged and ready to go? And then the other was on the 40 millimeter policy, the impact weapons policy. So those were the kind of three things that I identified. And I'm not sure if other people have other things that they would like to add.
Bill.
So I guess I just want to be clear. I mean, Lindsay, I think you have some ideas of how you want the policy to be addressed, and I don't think that's our place to do that. And I think they're mostly your sort of opinions. I think it's fine to say we want them to look at pepper ball. I think it's fine we want them to look at body worn cameras, but I'm not comfortable with you going in there saying the CRB wants you not to be shooting them at humans, that if somebody's coming from home, they have to somehow get a body cam. I mean, that's their discussions to have and the chief to figure out how to do those things. But I just not comfortable that the CRB is telling them to do that. But I think they should look at these items. And so, and I just want to be real careful about if we're going to put our name on something, that it's something we all agree that that's what we want, not just.
So yeah, that's what I want too. I agree, Bill.
So the process in my mind is that we would recommend that they look at these three policies, and then Lindsay, as a member of both committees, she could share her opinions on her own personal opinion, but not be speaking for us as we're asking for this, correct? Okay, I see nodding.
Well, I, for one, would be fine with her saying that some of us, there were some people on the CRB that had a problem with current practice, because that seems clear to me from the discussion.
And this could be maybe clarified if we did send the whole recommendation, correct? Because it talks more about how our discussion went. So our voices would be more varied there. Leah, who is this? Who's called in? Was that Bernadette?
It's Bernadette.
Okay.
The internet's not working, so I had to call in. Sorry.
All right.
I just wanted to say that I think this makes sense, and I've been to a fair number of police commission meetings, and so I think Lindsay saying that this is a policy that came up, and then when Lindsay, when you're talking about it, you can say some members felt this way, some members felt that way. The auditor wrote this long-winded memo saying this, like whatever you want to say, you can add at that point. So because I think it will be interesting to hear. I had my point of view, you all brought different points of view, and then to hear more from the police commission points of view, without necessarily having the actual specific use of the tool in their minds. Anyway, I'll stop talking because I know it's not my meeting.
So I guess my question,
something?
oh, please, Bernadette, sorry.
Sorry, I only heard some bits and pieces, so excuse me for recapping, so I make sure I understand where we are. We're talking about what we're going to present to, or ask you, Lindsay, to present to the police commission at their next meeting. Is that my understanding?
Yes. So I'm asking for your guidance about what you want me to take. I think sort of what I'm saying now, based on what I'm hearing, is that I would say that the CRB, including myself, would recommend that the police commission look at the pepper ball policy, the body worn camera policy, and the 40 millimeter impact weapon policy. My understanding is, so like based on Bill's comments, which makes sense to me, I would, and which is what I do, I speak for myself when talking about the specifics of how that might be reworded as part of the police commission, but that he's advocating against the CRB sending a statement with any particular recommendations in those policies about how the policy might go. I hope I'm understanding you correctly, Bill.
Okay, so my recollection of the police commission is they usually do a retreat or something either at the end of the year or the beginning of the year, so May or September, August, where they set their agenda for the entire year. And I know that when I tried to bring things forward to them, it was reporting about what we had done, what our case was about, and then asking basically the chair or the vice chair to make a note for the next time that they would be setting the policy review, that these were the policies that the CRB had, concerns about. And I'm thinking back to when we had the taser policy, but also the vehicular chase policy and the use of canines. And by the time the police commission got around to setting which policies they were going to review, the chief had already done some changes to those policies. And so while it sounds like it's kind of a not a great thing to do to wait really long time till they can put it on their agenda, that was kind of how it worked in the past. I mean, maybe they're doing things differently now, but that's just my recollection and what I would recommend. And I think if a policy comes up at some point in time that is coming up that relates to a case that we've done, you would ask our different perspectives on it to be able to report that as the liaison, but obviously giving your own input as well. Now I'll be quiet.
So Bernadette, that's super, super helpful. We're in a unique situation where the policies that we're talking about here related to this case are going to be discussed on Thursday. So when it comes to the impact weapons, for example, and when it comes to, is it called civil disturbance? I think that's what, sorry, is it a riot? Is it a civil disturbance? Is it a peaceful protest? There's a lot. Is it an insurrection? I don't know. Anyway, there's a lot of things in my brain. So we're in a unique situation where it's coming before them, and I think that's maybe you've identified, maybe you've put your finger on why this feels particularly awkward to me this month, is because that's the situation we're in. It's not that we're going to say we would like them in the future to set this agenda. I'm saying it's on the agenda. They're going to talk about it. Does the CRB want to weigh in as a body?
Got it. Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
A while ago, I saw Mark's hand. Is that still applicable, Mark?
Yeah, I was just gonna, we have different places where we can insert on policy. For example, when I first got the blue team on the 40 millimeter and I opened up the cases right away, I get some very quick feedback that it's like, well, the auditor doesn't like the 40 millimeter very much. And not in the particular situations in which I open the allegations. And then they get recommendation adjudication memo. And then they get recommendations from the review board. And then they go to police commission. Now, I know historically, police commission has had a work plan that is spread out over 1 year, but that doesn't prohibit the chief from making changes to policies when he thinks there ought to be changes to policy, and it doesn't prohibit the chief from making operational decisions on the fly, if you will, if he feels as if, maybe Leah's adjudication recommendation or my decision to open an allegation causes some review of the current practices. So all those things I think have great value, and I think that your recommendations as well have great value, but it's not so linear as it might appear at first blush that it has to go to police commission, and if it doesn't go to police commission and if they don't make a decision, that changes haven't been made. And I think the example from last weekend or what happened last weekend is a good example where they have made adjustments based on what they're hearing from the public and from our group together. Copy or over.
Michael.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a digression, but I was just thinking about the body cam issue and that we had addressed last month, and I was wondering, do we know who can someone tell me who the manufacturer is of the body cams that we currently use? Because I know that there are different, like many different companies make them, and they all have different kinds of mounts and different accessories, and this might not be a policy issue so much as an equipment issue that can be addressed. I don't know. I'm just
We use
wanted
the
to ask.
Axon body system. It's made by Taser, I believe. I think it's a sub company from Taser, but it's called Axon.
And does it have like is it a fixed mount, or is it a mount that can be like moved around?
For the body worn,
Yeah.
there's different depending if somebody's got an external vest. Normally they have those Molly carriers on them, so they're pretty well attached. If somebody wears a jacket or a more traditional uniform, we've got magnetic mounts, so the inside of the magnet goes inside the jacket, and then the camera mounts to the outside. Neither one of them are perfect. We've seen cases where they get knocked off in a fight or things like that, so they're not perfect. But the ones with the external vests are definitely more sturdy than the magnetic mounts that we have.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm just giving time every now and then for people to jump in or raise their hands.
Are we talking still just about kind of everything about the process, or are we just talking about police commission at this point?
I feel like maybe we could wrap up the police commission and give Lindsay some recommendations before we move on to other process things. If that makes sense to people.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, Lindsay, do you have a sense of what the recommendations are? Or does somebody want to make a movement? Do we need to make a movement for what Lindsay does, or a motion?
So
Okay.
as it stands now, what I can say, what I would say, I guess I'll just say what I would say as the liaison is that, we did the community impact case review. I explained a little bit about what that means and what the process was. And that in our discussions, and then also in adjudicating memos from the auditor's office, that the pepperball policy, the 40 millimeter impact weapon policy maybe warrant further review, and that we'd like the police commission to look at that, and that we also surfaced some maybe practice issues when it comes to body worn cameras, both in terms of not obscuring them with equipment and also in terms of them being available for people who get called out directly from home to respond to scenes. That's all I would say. I wouldn't, and then in the course of the discussion, I guess that's all I would say. What I know is that on Thursday, they're going to be talking specifically about the impact weapons. And so is there anything additional that you all would like to say as a group that I could forward to them? I guess that's the concrete question I'm asking at this moment.
Nothing from me. I think you will cover it just fine, Lindsay.
Go ahead, Bill.
So, and Lindsay, in no way am I trying to tell you what to say, but I wanted to tell you that when Steve McIntyre, was that there? When he used to bring stuff, and I just tell you this so that maybe this will help you a little bit, is that he used to walk us through like what the CRB talked about, and then like you could talk about the impact case and how that the use of these pepper balls and things like that was discussed a lot in the CRB, and there were some questions about the use. And then at the end, he would say, and we think the police commission should look at these 3 policies because they had to do with stuff that impacted these cases. Does that make sense? And again, I'm not trying to tell you how to say it, but I guess that made a lot of it was very impactful to the police commission because they kind of understood what you looked at and then what you bring into the table to then discuss. So again, just take that as just what we used to see from the group.
So in some cases, he was sent with a vote from the body saying, look at these things. And that's what I'm asking for. Do you want me to send specific things to that body? If you don't, that's fine. And I will say general things. If you do want me to say specific things in that last part that you were describing, he would say things based on what we had said, please go to the police commission and say these things, and we would vote on it. So that's why I'm asking, like, he didn't just come up with that. We did that as a group. And so if we want to do that as a group, I just want to make sure I'm not rolling in and misrepresenting what we all want.
Mark?
I was just going to add, and I don't know if this is the right forum or not. Certainly on at least one of the inquiries that Lindsay brought forward and some of the cases that were open, I think the public perspective of some of the language and characterizations that officers use, even in terms of strategy, is probably disconcerting, I think, to members of the public. And it, for me personally, knowing some of the people involved, it almost seems sort of that military perspective where people are referenced in a way that maybe dehumanizes them a little bit, or moderately or more so. And I don't know if it's a police commission thing or something in the general conversation. And I appreciate the moment in which officers are strategizing and how they reference people and how they might do things. But nevertheless, when you look it up at the public perspective, and it's not unlike how the military characterizes people, their opponents or their enemies, whether it's, and excuse my references here, in World War II, where Germans were called Krauts, and we can go through all the wars that we've been through, but there's always been a dehumanizing element to that. And maybe that helps justify in their own conscience why they need to do the things they do. But I still think that it lacks a certain degree of professionalism. And again, I get the stress. I know that for that one particular evening, the street crimes unit had worked all day, and now it's 2:30 in the morning, and now they're going back to the fairgrounds and they're regrouping and they're strategizing. And there was one comment like, "Oh, we're going to get reinforcements," and the one guy says, "Well, how many?" And I think it was one of the supervisors said 9, which was, of course, I think probably somewhat appalling if you were one of the people who had to go back into that sort of situation. But I think that just that general sense is something I think that from a professional standpoint needs to be addressed. I'm just not sure what forum that might be, but I think it was striking to some of us. I've been in this business a long time, and I appreciate the weariness of the officers involved, but I also think that in a professional organization, there's never a place for that. And again, I don't know where that is addressed. And again, I know that was impactful to Lindsay and in one of the inquiries that was brought forward. And so I just, before I make my departure, I wanted to bring that out there and let you guys decide maybe where the proper forum is for that. Over.
So does anybody have anything that they want us to vote on for Lindsay to take specifically? I think that's the question that Lindsay was asking. And I think that's where we kind of are right now. And I haven't heard anything. I'll give a minute. Bill?
Well, just to clarify, because we talked about those 3 policies that we wanted Lindsay to take. Do we need to formalize that? Lindsay, is that what you're asking for?
No, I'm saying they're talking about the impact weapon policy on Thursday.
Oh.
Does anybody have specific things that they want me to bring up about the 40 millimeter and how it was used in this case and how maybe we should not use it like that in the future? If we don't, as a group, want to say anything, that's fine. I will say my own personal opinion at that table, but I'm quite certain I don't have, there are many minds of maybe how that policy might be reviewed. And so I would like to include your voices if that is something that you would like.
So would it help to move that we vote to advise Lindsay to bring up the 40 millimeter round and say that the what are we? The Civilian Review Board, or a majority of the Civilian Review Board, or not if this doesn't pass, would like that specifically to be reconsidered, the current practice to be reconsidered. And I'm forgetting already what Lindsay asked, but whatever Lindsay said. What was it? Not used in that way? Is that the?
As crowd dispersal, is that what we're talking about?
I'm gonna go ahead and just read some stuff from Leah's memo verbatim. So
Thank you.
Kind of wrap our hands around the conversation, if that's okay with you.
What Leah said.
Yeah, I mean, that should make her happy. Okay, so I'm just gonna start at the top and read down. Sorry, for those of you who have binders, this is the December 3rd memo from Leah to Chief Skinner. The subject is policy recommendations related to impact weapons. And I find it under, well, I can't say that number, so I don't want to say that IA number out loud. So sorry, it's about 25% of the way through your binder. So EPD's response to community demonstrations over the weekend included several different force options, including both extended range and short range impact weapons. As a result of our review of those uses of force, we recommend EPD review its policy and training on less lethal projectiles, including extended range impact weapons in crowd management situations. More specific recommendations are below. So, one thing that it strikes me that we can do is refer to this document, right, and point to it. But these projectiles are designed to prevent penetration and instead stun the target with blunt force trauma. But the fact remains that they can and do cause injury and have the potential to kill. We are particularly concerned with the possibility that due to the sometimes chaotic and confusing nature of protests or demonstrations, these projectiles may strike and injure people lawfully exercising their constitutional rights. So here's what I would say is policy recommendation number 1. All impact weapons are currently in the same policy. There should be a separate policy for extended range impact weapons. That policy should articulate the seriousness of the weapon and its potential impact, including the probability of serious injury, physical injury, or death should the weapon strike the head or neck of a person. So that would be a specific policy recommendation number 1. Let me look here. I'm going to skip the parts that are like going into more details about that here. So it says the International Association of Chiefs of Police issued a crowd management concepts and issues document that noted in large crowds, direct fire munitions such as a 40 millimeter may not hit their intended target. I think we saw that many, many times over the course of this. So we've also witnessed that. And so they state, for this reason, these weapons should generally be used, and this is quote, against specific individuals who are engaged in conduct that poses an immediate threat of death or serious injury or significant levels of property damage in a mass demonstration setting. So that's still, yeah, okay. Because these weapons have the potential to cause serious injury or death, they should only be used to stop those committing serious crimes or where there is imminent risk of serious physical injury. They should not be used for generalized crowd dispersal or in a situation where the user is wearing a gas mask or other gear that prevents the weapon from being accurately sighted. And then on the following page, Leah gives some sample policy language from the Seattle Police Department below, and just gives specific language. And then this is intended to be a starting point for discussion of policy and training. The Civilian Review Board will undoubtedly have valuable input following their review of the community impact case, and the Police Commission process of policy review will be instrumental in clarifying community expectations around the use of these tools. So I would love it if we as a group would say that we recommend that impact weapons should have a separate policy, and that separate policy should be carefully examined in light of everything that we've learned based on this community impact case, and that we should highlight the potential for serious injury and death because of these weapons, and therefore very carefully examine their use in crowd control. I don't know if, go ahead.
I see Bernadette's hand has been up for a while.
Sorry.
Right.
So I think we're getting really into the weeds on this whole thing. I think we have to always remember that we, just like the Police Commission, are advisory. And so it's having a voice there. We're not going to actually write the policy, you know, and the Police Commission is not going to write the policy. The chief writes the policy with the input from all of these various places and people. So I'm very confident that Lindsay is going to represent the points of view from our board to the Police Commission, where the chief will once again hear what we said at the meeting last month. I don't feel that we need to do a motion unless Lindsay wants us to. So I'm quite confident that she will represent all of these things. But I think we just don't need to get so tied to words and things like that. I think, yes, saying that it should be a separate policy, I think that's a great thing. We said it at our meeting. I think the chief heard it. Saying it again for the Police Commission is great. But I think beyond that, I think we need to just not get so pedantic is the only word that's coming up with me right now. And so I'm going to stick with that one.
Okay, Michael, and then I think there's Everett's hand after Michael.
So Bernadette, you might have been reconnecting when Lindsay asked us for a motion, or at least for a vote, so that to sort of give her more of a sense of this is what the CRB wanted. I hope I'm not mischaracterizing Lindsay, but I heard you ask for a vote. So I wonder if a more simple way of addressing this might be to vote on whether we would like Lindsay to ask the Police Commission to consider the issues brought up in Leia's Deputy Police Auditor Pitcher's memo to the chief, right? Just so that memo or those specific things during the Police Commission's discussion of this specific policy get discussed, you know, because I know that the chief goes to those meetings, but it might be easier not to put it on him to bring this up, even though the memo went to him, but just to, you know, have another body that is saying we would like this discussed. And that way we're not recommending specific policy. We're not in the weeds. We're just recommending Deputy Auditor Pitcher's weed whacker.
Go ahead, Rick.
I completely respect Leah's point of view, and I think we should let the Police Commission know what the police auditor's office believes but I don't think that necessarily reflects what the CRB believes about what policies should be written, nor do I believe that we have a right to tell the police commission what policies should be written.
Bernadette, is your hand up again, or is it still up from before?
No, my hand is not up. I don't know how to put it down, but
Okay.
I'll try and figure that out.
Okay. Leah can probably put it down too. So I'm still not hearing
Like-
much of a consensus on how to move forward with this. Besides just taking the policy that they're already talking about, Lindsay, and saying that we recommend that they talk about the things that they're planning to talk about. And Leah?
I just have an idea. It seems as though, I think what I'm hearing consensus on is that the group had concerns about the policies that Lindsay has already specified. And then Lindsay can bring forth whatever points of view she wants using my memo or not. And I'll be there, and I'm always there, so I can tell the auditor's point of view as well. But to me, it seems like if we say, or if you all decide to have a vote on, we all agree, we have issues with these policies and we would like police commission to look at them. I feel like that gives Lindsay the push she needs, I think.
Yeah, and I guess maybe part of it is just could be handled in like an informational sharing as opposed to like a policy recommendation way. So there's no reason that the police commission is going to have this memo from the auditor to the chief. Is there a reason or strong objections to simply sharing it so that they can read it before they talk about the policy? Like they're not going to, it's not in the packet, right? So if we would like them to consider the things that Leah said, they would have to be able to see the things that Leah said. So I guess from a staff perspective, I guess we could just request, like, Leah, can you send, is there a reason why you can't send that memo? I don't know. I'm like honest to goodness asking. I don't know if that's procedurally problematic for some reason, but if it's not, can we info share so that at least they have that bit of information, which is public information about the policy they're going to talk about, which doesn't commit any of you to saying that's what you think should happen. It's just an info share from the auditor's office perspective. And that then I don't mind, based on the conversation here, I don't feel like I'm going out on a limb saying we would like them to look at these 3 policies. That seems like everybody's pretty comfortable with that. Beyond that, there's levels of discomfort, and that's fine. So we don't do anything beyond that, and that's okay with me. But it does seem like there's some information that we have that they don't, that might be if they can have it, it might be useful in their discussion.
So just as a point, there's nothing in there that's exempt from release. So I don't see a reason why I can't send it to police commission staff.
Does that work for everyone?
Is it, maybe raise your hand if you're comfortable with Lindsay taking the policies and sharing, or Leah sharing her recommendation.
Bernadette is voting down. Oh no, now she's saying fine.
Okay. Well, we didn't need her anyway because enough of us voted yes. Sorry, Bernadette. So democracy works, man. Okay, another thing to talk about was just the procedural and the procedure of doing the community implication overall.
Just to, I wanted, oh, I see Bill's got his hand up, so I shouldn't I just want to feedback on, I did my best to organize this in the way that worked for my brain and the investigators' brains, and present it in the way, and I wanted feedback on organization, thoroughness, timelines, things you wish would be different, things that you thought were great, what if there were any of those, all of that stuff. Thank you. I'll stop talking.
Go ahead, Bill.
So, well, I was quite the way to segue me into that, Leah, because I was going to say, I think the way it was set up with the big picture in the beginning to look at and discuss and then go through the individuals was really well done. It sort of took us through a process of let's look at all that happened and then let's talk about some of the individuals. I think that was really good. Probably the problem I had, or the biggest problem I had with this, was this arbitrary time frame that the ordinance put in on us as volunteer board to say that, and maybe they never expected something that had this much material. They didn't expect body cams to be in place when this was written, because I mean, I felt in a lot of ways that I didn't have enough time to really do the job that I think we should have done, and then be able to, I almost wish it was like we got it, we had a discussion, we went back, reviewed some more, and then came back as a group and discussed it and did the final adjudications. Because I think there was a lot of things that brought up that in my mind, I was like, wait, I missed that on the body cam, or I want to go back and look at that because did I miss what it said? So I think the 14-day to begin with needs to be readjusted if we ever look at something this size again, because man, that was hard to get through. Am I supposed to say over now, or what's it, Mark, did I say?
Over.
I thought Rick and Leah with hands. So Rick, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, let me say that I didn't know what, I don't remember I said it at the time of what we were discussing these cases, but the work that was done by the sergeants from Internal Affairs was very, very good. And it belies the notion from many people in the community that I've seen on the committee that there's something rigged about how internal affairs and police departments operate, that they're going to favor the police all the time. I think that these individuals did a really good job of looking at these carefully, and as they have done throughout my time on the Civilian Review Board. So I have to give my hats off to Sergeant Barrett and Sergeant Williams, and if there's anybody else that was involved in the investigation whose names I've forgotten, those also. It was a first-rate job.
Thank you, Rick.
Michael has his hand up, and Leah, do you want to defer to Michael even though you had your hand up, or would you like to go? Go.
And was for Bernadette.
Oh.
Okay. So for me, yeah, so Sergeant Nelson was the other one that was pretty instrumental in getting all of this, all this report investigated into us. And yeah, hats off to all three of those guys and everybody else that helped them. So to get ready for tonight, it was a little easier than getting ready for last month. But the one thing that I kind of went back and kept looking at was what the ordinance specifically says. And I kind of, well, I voted last, whatever it was, that we said that we would take this as a community impact case. I feel like we kind of rushed into it because the way community impact cases, as I read the ordinance, it's supposed to be the police auditor makes a determination that it's a community impact case. And I think, at least in the one other community impact case that we had, it wasn't at the very beginning, right after the episode, that it was determined to be a community impact case. It was during the course of the review of it that it was recognized that this is something that should have community comment before an adjudication. And so I think when we take into consideration how a community impact case should be designated, which is the police auditor determines that it's community impact case, and then we would accept it as such. And then we look at further, what is our role and what are we supposed to do? And we're supposed to be oversight of the investigation and the complaint process. And that's sometimes a hard thing to do when a case is this large. and we want to start looking at, the policy or what the officers did or didn't do, and it gets kind of muddied. And so I think a slowing down of a designation of community impact makes more sense in the future, because I think had it slowed down a little bit, it would have been a little bit different how maybe it came to us, that we wouldn't have had to do all of these all at once in those 14 days. And I know that there's a lot of reasons for why that 14 days is in there, because, I mean, just like in a criminal case, a defendant has a right to a speedy trial. Employees have a right to have their investigations done quickly and not have things hanging over them for a really long time. And so when we do a community impact case, we're inserting ourselves in a process that usually should, by the time the investigation is done, start wrapping up pretty quickly. And so, yeah, in a case like this where it's so overwhelming, it's hard, but I think we have to balance that with the need for the employee to be able to have some resolution of what's going on as well. So I think that's the one thing that would be good for us to always remember, and maybe review a little more often as to what is our role in this, as an advisory board to the city council. What are we supposed to be looking at, and what makes the most sense for, not just for us as a body, but also for the police department and the city council. That's all.
Okay, Michael, then Lindsay, then Mark.
Yeah, so I lost my train of thought, so I'm not sure what I originally raised my hand about. What were we talking about?
Thoroughness of IA and insufficiency of 14 days were the two things that came up. I don't know if that's helpful.
A little. I think I was going to say something different, but I'll talk about that instead. I think that and you had also asked. Yes, I remember now. Leigh had asked about the organization of stuff. And so I might not be the best person to speak to that, since I reorganized my binder. And as a result, I probably came to things later than I would have if I'd read it from front to back. And so there was some really useful stuff I remember coming to late, and I don't remember if it was because of the reorganization or not. But there was some really helpful, like a couple of I think it might have been the internal affairs sergeants had done this really like detailed timelines of the events of the days. And I read that at the end, and I wish I'd read it at the beginning. Was I supposed to read it at the beginning? Yeah, okay. So that was my fault. So that would be like a compliment to the original organization before I reorganized the binder. As far as the 14 days goes, I'm also probably not the right person, because I missed the memo that we had rescheduled the meeting. And so I spent that first weekend cramming and went through I was ready for the for the meeting a week early. So then I got like this like leisure of a week to like go back and look at all of the things. So I guess that might be something in favor of having the opportunity to go over the materials, discuss them, and go back, because I definitely found that being able to go back to the materials after having gone through them, I just saw a lot of stuff that was not apparent to me the first time through. So yeah, I don't know, perhaps, since this is something that the city council could do, I imagine would be to build some kind of flexibility into that 14 days. I don't know if there's a possibility for them to, like, I could imagine language that would give them the ability to extend that on the request of the CRB, for example. We say, oh, we need more time because this is a lot of material this time around, and then they can grant a 7-day extension or a 10-day extension or whatever. That would probably be a fairly easy way of addressing it that wouldn't change the principle, but would give us some breathing room. You know, assuming the city council decides to grant it to us, which they may not if they think that we're being whiny complainers. As far as, so I'm, you know, my read of the ordinance, it seems to me, you know, yes, the CRB agrees to, how's it put, review board accepts the community impact case, right? But as Bernadette was saying, the identification of it as a community impact case is done by the auditor's office, and so we don't really like that. That's your job. We accept it, and so I think that, as I recall, the discussions that we had back in, I guess it was July. I don't think it was in June yet. Maybe it was in June. The discussions that we had. I was pretty convinced that the decisions that were being made by the auditor's office were good ones about how to best handle this. Obviously, it was still a moving target at the time, but I think that there was good faith there, and it made sense once that determination had been made by the auditor. It made total sense as a CRB to accept it, and I think that we had. We knew it was going to be a lot. We were told many times it was going to be a lot, and you know that was on us to plan, or we had time to resign if we didn't want to deal with this.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
Over.
The walkie-talkie language is so fun. Okay. So I agree that this was a very thorough and detailed investigation. I thought it was well organized. I wanted to say a particular thank you to Sergeant Sparrow and Nelson for making the videos, so that not only they had this paper like timeline of what happened, but they also made videos which include maps, which really helped me understand how things moved and changed. We've never done videos like that before, but I found them tremendously helpful. I was actually really disappointed the public can't see them because it had a whole bunch of information the public's not entitled to see, but it helped me understand what was happening at a broader level, which then helped everything else make sense. So that was super good work and very, very helpful to this process. I'm of two minds when it comes to the time frame thing. Most community impact cases are truly a community impact case, not community impact cases. This was like a pile of cases, right? So even if we had just been looking at them under ordinary circumstances without the 14 days, it still would have been overwhelming. Obviously, the 14-day thing sort of made it even more overwhelming. But there is something about moving the process along and not letting it get bogged down, right? That I sort of appreciate. I also suspect, though I couldn't say that this is definitively so, that calling it a community impact case and labeling it as such early in the process gives a signal to the public and also to the chief that this is something that we should dedicate resources to. And so I don't know if that's true or if that's helpful, but I can see all the case, I should say, I don't want this to be confusing. I have never seen a case that I thought was poorly investigated or poorly organized. And this is yet one more example of what I think was very good work, but this was so much more work than would be typical to come to the CRB that it required a massive allocation of resources. So I guess I'm just saying, I appreciate that those resources were allocated as they were. The other thing that I would say process-wise, and again, this is partially I'm saying this out loud because I think at the ad hoc committee meeting, there's some conversations about this. So just in case anybody is watching this, this is the only time I can remember seeing something when reviewing a case that I had further questions about, that I wanted or was asked if Mark was comfortable, investigating more and then bringing it back to us. And so I saw something I was curious about, I wanted to know more about, and the auditor did those things, went back, did addition, there was some interviews done, there was some review of the video by people who are experts, not me, I'm not an expert. That work was done and then it came back to us. And so I'm saying that for me, that worked. And I appreciate that, that when I raised a concern, that it was taken seriously, and then that the work was done to bring it back, and that was a very transparent process. So I just wanted to call that out and say that publicly in case it's helpful. Yeah, it was overwhelming. I don't know if there was anything that could be done about it procedurally. Just that it was a lot. That's all.
Go ahead, Mark. And then Jose.
Thanks. Clarify a number of issues. First, in terms of Bernadette's point about the first community impact case, I think they had made the decision within hours. Actually, one of the former auditors was at the scene when that event occurred. I think back in 2008. When I arrived in 2009, I wasn't sure that was the path. Perhaps that was should be taken, but it was one that was taken in any case. There were no ICVs and car videos or body worn cameras, and that certainly changes the dynamic. When the ordinance was drafted, when the protocols were drafted, I suspect in today's day and age that we would get an accommodation for that if we wish to extend that. Not sure we felt comfortable at this particular time because we weren't really sure in terms of dealing with the protests and the riots and things that might be the best option. In terms of the impact of a community impact case, I suppose there's two things. Number one is how thorough and complete the investigation is. And I think given the expertise of our office, given the expectations we have from the police department and the expertise that exists in the police department, I think it's pretty clear in terms of the investigative process and the evidence gathered what the expectations are. So it would seem to be extraordinarily rare that something gets kicked back because this is just a terrible interview, or the evidence is not there. That's probably more likely to occur in an infant case than in one of these cases. And the other thing that's impactful in a community impact case, which again, I think also can throw up obstacles, is the ability of the review board to give an adjudication recommendation to the chief before he makes a final adjudication. Some might argue in an arbitration process, for example, that then that places political pressure on the chief to make a decision as opposed to his decision as an administrator. But honestly, that's obviously never been tested. But I think that was probably the primary goal when this was conceptualized, is that you get a community reaction and a community recommendation prior to the chief making a final decision. So yeah, this was, I think this was one where, at least at the beginning, because there were so many community members involved and were directly impacted by the police response, how it would be a community impact case. I noted, I think when you actually heard the case, there were maybe 34, 35 participants in the entire Zoom meeting, and half of those were all of us. So in the end game, it didn't seem like there was that impactful community. And I think in the first community impact case, on the Van Ornum case, there might have been 50 or less people at the library to hear that particular case. So again, if you do numbers, it certainly doesn't seem impactful. But I think again, when these events first occurred, that it would be impactful. But wrapping up, as I said, I think the primary goal is to have a recommendation to the chief before he makes a final decision. I'm glad I started a trend. Over.
Go ahead, Jose.
Copy. So one of the things that I wanted to, I'm grateful for this topic. One of the things that I would like to bring up is that given the events of last week, given the events of this summer, the definition of community impact is likely to change from here on out. And I think we should take that into consideration and allow that to guide how this process changes. I'm not saying I know, but I say that with confidence that it is about to change in a very significant way. It already is. Within that, I would like to say that I would appreciate, I forgot who said it prior to me, but I would appreciate 2 periods of review. There were things that, for example, I remember Bill saying, the comment, Bill, that you made about leadership and, expecting more out of our leaders. That's something that I had not considered, and that was very impactful to me immediately, changed my mind and how I thought about things. I would love the opportunity to revisit cases that have this importance and this weight to them with that kind of perspective. I think it's just good. It allows me to deliberate better. And I'm just throwing my hat out in the ring to say I would be willing to do 2 meetings in 1 month, even for that. I think that we have so few opportunities to be able to enter into the exchange, which, on like an ideal level is what democracy is all about, is submitting your ideas and arguments into the forum where they're likely to be met with opposition. I personally like that. I feel like I get closer to justice when I get more opportunity to do that. So I would like more opportunity to do that. I don't know if it's feasible. I just want to say it out loud. I also want to say thank you for the design of the packets, which are the binder, which I found helpful. In my prior life, I was an information designer, and I believe that good information design makes for good democracy. So thank you for that. I know it's an incredible amount of work and labor to do that. One of the things that I have always been vocal about bringing to this board was that I see the board as like, in some role, doing reparative work with the community to create buy-in at a time where, in general, there's not a whole lot of trust in civic institutions from any side of the spectrum. And so, I make this suggestion, for more periods of review to continue to try to pursue that work of, generating buy-in from the community and thinking about things like reconciliation and that sort of stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose.
Leah, go ahead.
No, I thought that was interesting, and as Jose was talking, I was trying to think, and I might send a note or something about this later, but just wondering if we could figure out if we have more of these in the near future, which it was a whole lot of work, you guys, but having one meeting to sort of satisfy the 14-day requirement and one meeting to satisfy the 30-day requirement, if I could figure out a way to make that happen. But this is a really helpful discussion, so thank you.
All right, if we don't have any more recommendations or discussion on the process, we have in the agenda, we have the auditor report, closing comments, and adjourn, and it is the time that we should be adjourning. So do we want to rush through that? I see Michael. Is that who you're pointing to, Leah?
Yeah, I just really quickly, I just wanted to, so following up on Mark's question, point about the extent to which community was sort of present for the deliberations. I put this in the chat, but I saw that our December meeting where we discussed this had 46 views. That's about half of what our July meeting has on YouTube. So it's not clear that that there was a significant, and, you know, the Register Guard even did a story that we were going to be talking about it. So I'm not sure what that says. It was nice to see people showing up, but it was clearly a slackening of interest compared to the summer.
That's important. That's an important observation, and it's interesting. I mean, normally we could see who saw our meetings because they would be in the room with us, but since our meetings are permanently available, that it makes it different. Do we want to take a quick break, or do we want to just push through? Push through. Rick is saying push through. Okay. Leah?
I wanted to make
Bernadette?
one more comment, if I could.
Yeah.
The idea of having two meetings, that, you know, the idea that we kind of talk about it and then we go back and review it and then we talk about it some more, and we get to hear people's perspective and it might inform our own. I'm torn between that because while I really like that idea on one level, the discussion and the reflection, there's also part of me that kind of thinks the whole idea behind the Civilian Review Board process is to get our opinions on things and not necessarily be convinced by one of our fellow board members of a particular perspective. And so while I'm not saying I think it's a bad idea to do that, I have the caution of, you know, when we make changes, what are the unintended consequences that might be coming about in doing such a change? So I just wanted to mention that. And I'm fine if we go forward or if we take a break, either way.
Is there anything else that we need to say before we move on to the auditor report? Lindsay, you wanted the two cases you brought up to be brought up during the auditor's report, correct? Do you want to?
Yeah, if Mark, if you don't mind just quickly discussing sort of, yeah, that would be great, just so that's in the record of the meeting.
Well, I touched on the other subject about the language and how sometimes a few officers describe community members in a way that at times can be a little bit disconcerting, while appreciating the adrenaline of the moment and the weariness of the moment and things like that. I think it's still something that I'm hopeful that from a cultural standpoint, there might be a shift in that. With regard to the use of the 40 millimeter on Friday night, I rewatched all the videos and things like that, and I think there were 4 deployments. And I got a timeline from Sergeant Barrett in terms of this was post-destructive behavior. This was after the fires. This was after the lootings, both on Broadway and over on 7th Street. And I think it was more targeted at people. I know at least one was a rock thrower and things like that. So I found that fundamentally different than chasing someone who had a 5-minute curfew to vacate the streets and is running away for disorderly conduct. On Sunday evening, there was just such a fundamental difference in those two things. And I actually thought that the officer was on Friday night was poised in his actions. There might have been one with the person with the bicycles, like, oh, I don't know, but at the same time, they were blocking the officers. And again, this was post after realizing that they were going to get a whole 9 reinforcements, 9 people as reinforcements, getting no help from any other external agency. So I thought, all things considered, it was a measured use of the 40 millimeter. As was pointed out to me several times, I'm not a big fan of the 40 millimeter in those types of situations. I know it's a military weapon. I know it is used to disarm someone who's going to create serious physical harm. But within the training at the time that the police department had received in this use, I didn't find it to the level of an allegation of serious misconduct that we would have brought forward. And honestly, I reviewed when it first happened and it was put in the blue team, probably early June. I had reviewed that again as well. So this was a second review for me, and I still felt that way. Again, given the velocity of the weapon, and when you're in this business a long time, seeing a lot of carnage that weapon has caused, both here at home and abroad, it's something that I do take very seriously. But in this particular instance, I thought that he acted within the scope of his training under those circumstances. And again, this was post after a lot of things occurred. And for people that know me, I think once people start setting fires, I think the dynamic of an entire situation changes completely. And so whether that's helpful from an experience standpoint or a curse from an experience standpoint, in either case, I thought it was reasonable under the circumstances. I have a couple other issues to talk about as well, but if you want to stay on those for a minute, that's fine. Ready? Okay, so the other thing is just trying to finalize my timeline with the bureaucracy and the paperwork and things like that. Long story short, my last day will be February 26th. It's in the midst of COVID and the midst of a bunch of paperwork and things like that. So, but February 26th will be my last day. And then I haven't heard a final verdict from City Council. I'm assuming that this will transition then over to Leah, at least on a pro tem basis. I don't think it's a good time to make wholesale changes during COVID and things like that. So that's what my expectation would be. I sort of, for those of you, from a football metaphor standpoint, I remember when Peyton Manning retired from the Denver Broncos after winning the Super Bowl. And that's where I feel as if I'm leaving just such a great team at a time where I think they're just doing outstanding work. But it's a wise decision for me to do it at the time that I'm doing it. And I'm just grateful for all of your work and all the work of the people that I've had the honor and the privilege to work with on my team. I'm done now.
I'd like to express gratitude, and I think I speak for everyone and for all of your service in your position. And we appreciate all your work and the way that you have led the office for the past many years that you've been there. So thank you very much, Mark. Are we ready for closing comments? Okay. People have moved around on my screen a little bit, and that's fine. But I will make Bernadette go last because she went first so much last month. I think that's kind of my closing comment, just thanking Mark for his time and for a job well done. Michael and then Lindsay.
Sure. So yeah, I don't really have closing comments except, and I want to try to not thank Mark yet because he's not done yet. I'm gonna wait until to February to gush. but definitely, yeah, it's been a pleasure to work with the auditor's office under Mark's direction.
So thank you for contextualizing those two issues that I had asked about, Mark. That's exactly what I was hoping for. So it's just really helpful for me to take something that I look at, that I see, that I don't have a lot of context for, and to get your sort of expert opinion about. So I appreciate you taking the time to do it, and also Sergeant Barrett and everyone else who had to be involved in that extra work. So I appreciate that. It helps me. It fills me with confidence about the process. So thank you for taking the extra time to do that. And I think that's the only other notes I wrote, was just, I will also thank you, Mark, for your service. It's been great. We've worked together a lot in a lot of different contexts and capacities. And so thank you for your service to our community, and you will be around next month. So until next month, and we'll say our real goodbyes.
All right, Jose, then Bill, then Rick, then Bernadette, if we can remember that.
Yeah, I've expressed this before, and I will express it again, that I appreciate, yeah, I would like to express gratitude for the patience in onboarding a novice like me onto this board, especially in weird, unprecedented times like this. And, you know, even if the thing that I appreciate today that really takes a load off of me in these weird polarized times is that even if I have differences of opinion with folks, I still feel a sense of trust with them. And that gives me hope. So thank you. And Mark, I will also defer any head scruffing until next month.
So I just, I want to thank the auditor's office and Sergeant Barrett and Nelson and even Williams for doing a great job on this community impact, and appreciate everything that you did. And thank everybody else for their hard work. Over.
Mark, I'll share my thoughts with you personally, and probably next meeting we'll get an opportunity. Bring your rain suit so you don't cry all over everything, and we'll pour some Gatorade over the top of your head.
You done, Rick?
He's done. He's nodding.
Over.
Okay. Okay, it's my turn to talk. So I think what's interesting about the week of this meeting in relationship to what we talked about last month is, last month, the whole reason for the protests that started turned into a riot completely got lost in the riot. And now we're looking at things that happen in Washington, D.C. that, you know, are so polarizing, and we're getting I'm getting comments, and I'm sure others are as well, you know, that are speculating that, you know, the police were somehow involved in letting people into the Capitol. And then an equal number of people saying, you know, that there were some police holding a good hard line to save the lives of many people inside the Capitol. And I think if there's anything that this process has brought to light to me, and I hope to our community, is that slowing down and taking the time for a good, thorough investigation, which, as we saw in the binder of the December meeting, is what we get. And it's what we get every month, whether it's a smaller allegation or obviously something as large as this community impact case. And so I just hope that as we go forward and we continue to, you know, have things happen in our community and in, you know, our state or the nation, that we can just remember that it's good to slow down until we can hear the facts on both sides before really even forming an opinion, but certainly before making any kind of decision. So I appreciated that the chief came and listened to us last month. And I think that anytime we have police in the audience and can hear our discussions, I think it informs them as much as how to do their job as it informs the community as to what the police are doing or at least trying to do. That's all. Thank you.
I kind of piggybacking on that, I hope that Washington, D.C. has an oversight system that is as robust as Eugene's. At the same time, I am very glad that I'm not on that committee if they have one, because that is going to be difficult. So I will adjourn this meeting, and we will meet again the second Tuesday in February to talk about cases again. And I appreciate taking this time tonight to talk about process and everything. So thank you all and have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks, Carolyn.